Greetings! Welcome everyone, and thank you for coming out to our group author reading. This reading is brought to you by Strong Women, Strange Worlds, which is a group of authors supporting other authors. Our mission is to elevate the voices of women and non-binary authors of science fiction, fantasy, and horror through events like these bi-monthly virtual quick read sessions. You can find out more about Strong Women, Strange Worlds in the handout that you will find in the chat and by visiting our website. This link will also appear in the chat shortly at strongwomenstrangeworlds.weebly.com. I would also like to take a moment to thank everyone who has been able to make a tip jar donation. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. That link will also appear in the chat later on. And we want to extend a special welcome to our new collaborators, Angie and Christy, right now, who are in the audience today. I'll putting their link in the chat so that you can check out their author interviews on their YouTube channel. My name is Elaine Isaak, and I will be your host today. You can find out more about me in the provided handout as well. Please note, recording of this session by the audience is not allowed, and recording of electronic communications, including Zoom meetings and webinars without permission, is illegal. Today, we'll be featuring 6 authors: Stephanie Burgis, Kelley M. Frank, Amelia Gorman, Helyna L. Clove, Michelle Renee Lane, and Devan Barlow. Each author will have 8 minutes to read. Our first reader today is Stephanie Burgis. Stephanie Burgis grew up in Michigan, but now lives in Wales, where she writes historical romantasy for adults, including the Regency Dragon series, the Harwood Spellbook series, and Good Neighbors, as well as fun middle-grade fantasy novels. She has had over 40 short stories published in various magazines and anthologies. Stephanie, take it away.
Hello. I am so pleased to be here, and also I want to warn you that this is my first reading on the Zoom on my phone, so if I drop the phone, please forgive me. I'm going to try not to get too carried away and do that. So I'm going to be reading from a part of Claws and Contrivances where the heroine, Rose Tregarth, is setting out to try to find the so-called monster that her cousin Beth reported finding in their dilapidated old Abbey-cum manor house in Wales, where Rose is a poor relation. Rose found a smile tugging on her lips as she strode through the low-roofed maze of familiar scruffy rooms towards the abandoned buttery where Beth had been very nearly attacked and had escaped only just in time. The skirts of Rose's inherited gown swished purposefully about her legs as she passed through every dark wooden door along the way, and she felt quite like a knight herself, setting out to battle a mysterious new menace in defense of her family's honor. She might not have any interest in the approaching visitor whose academic brilliance her uncle so admired, but she had every interest in keeping her family safe, happy, and well-regarded. Uncle Perry had been bursting with unmistakable agitation for days now, peering out of the windows at all times of day and night, and pacing back and forth through the house like a restless ghost as he fretted over whatever intellectual puzzle had led him to summon assistance in the first place. The least Rose could do was keep his long-awaited visitor from being frightened away at the door by marauding rodents. And she had to admit it was entirely satisfying to have a goal that didn't require any uncomfortable soul-searching on her part, unlike the abandoned grand plan in her commonplace book. All she had to do now as she stepped through the final doorway into the cluttered and shadowy end room full of broken furniture and other long-abandoned items was establish the facts, devise a simple strategy, and Rose startled back, heart flying into her throat, as something hurtled directly over her moving feet and flashed past. It was gone before she could even get a proper look, absorbed into the deeper shadows behind the heavy old broken oak armoire that stood along the closest wall of the buttery. That hadn't been a mouse. It hadn't even been a rat. It had been much too large for that. She'd caught only an impression, sleek, long, dark, fast, as it had tangled with her skirts in the shadows. And yet, if she hadn't known better? Don't be absurd. Rose stiffened her spine and quelled her rioting imagination with the image of her older sister. What would Eleanor say if she were here? Oh, Rose, you know this isn't one of your silly novels. Even Rose had to admit that she had been rather prone to falling into romantic flights of fancy when she was younger. But somewhere across this hard and fog-bound last year, she had learned better than to believe in impossibilities. Be sensible, she whispered to herself. Her Uncle Perry might be a passionate scholar of dragon legends, but it was a solid and unromantic fact that he would never be able to afford a living dragon of his own. Uncle Perry couldn't even afford to send his daughters to Bath for a season, much less equip any of them with the most stylish and outrageously expensive accessory that any young lady could carry on her shoulder nowadays to attract a husband. Like everyone else in the nation, Rose had seen plenty of sketches of pet dragons in the newspaper's society columns ever since they had been so famously rediscovered. That was where they belonged, though, in dazzling high society ballrooms, surrounded by flashing diamonds and haughty aristocrats. Not hiding behind broken furniture in a sad, dark little room packed full of her extended family's unwanted belongings. Her uncle and aunt hadn't the heart to dispose of even their most useless old possessions. Much like Rose, every item in this room was housed as an act of charity. Now you're simply being maudlin. It was her younger sister's tart voice that Rose heard in her head this time. Harriet had always been the best at piercing her moments of melodrama. Shaking herself free of the descending fog, Rose took a restorative breath and sank to her knees on the dusty floor to peer into the shadows. It was a warm, bright afternoon outside, but the leaded window at the far end of the buttery was almost entirely blocked by a stack of broken chairs that had been piled haphazardly atop an ugly and old-fashioned chaise lounge. Only faint and narrow streams of light escaped around the gaps or filtered in from the room next door, enough to outline every horrifyingly jumbled piece of clutter on the floor, but nowhere near enough to pierce the thick darkness that lay behind the hulking armoire. Hello? This creature had to be a cat to move so swiftly. That was the only plausible explanation. Remembering various felines she had known in her first village, Rose shifted back to give it space, even as she clicked her tongue in soft enticement. If you're looking for food, puss, you've come to the wrong room. There's nothing to fear, though. Beth would have spoiled your heart out if you'd only given her a pitiful look. No one in this family would ever turn away astray. You should come out and let me show you to the others. Just wait. Within a week, you'll be the roundest, happiest house pet imaginable. Something shifted in the darkness, as if the creature was actually considering her promise. As casually as possible, Rose laid her hand beside the gap between the armoire and the wall and tapped her fingertips lightly against the dirty floorboards in a ripple of temptation. Why don't you come and introduce yourself properly so my poor cousin doesn't have to worry about impossible monsters anymore? Something scraped against the wall behind the armoire, and Rose blinked. That hadn't sounded like cat fur. Claws scratched against the floorboards. And then, in a sudden frantic rush, before Rose could think better of her unprotected position, that long form exploded out from the gap and landed in front of her, panting with unambiguous terror. Golden eyes caught her own in a wild and desperate plea from a small, rectangular, wine-red face framed by two crooked horns. Small, clipped wings fluttered about the creature's long and glittering back, but couldn't lift its body from the ground. A sinuous forked tail stuck out through the open doorway in a straight line of panic. Rose swallowed hard as she gazed down into the dragon's shining and impossible eyes. Perhaps, she whispered, Beth wasn't wrong about everything after all. And I want to stop here so I have enough time to just let you know my giveaway, which is something you will already have if you're a newsletter subscriber. But if you're not yet a newsletter subscriber, I want to let you know that if you sign up, it's stephanieburgess.com/newsletter or do it through the SWSW today, then every subscriber automatically gets a free copy of the optional epilogue to Claws and Contrivances, which takes place about 3 years after the end of this book.
Wow, Stephanie, that was delightful. Thank you so much. I think people are very excited to find out what happens next with Tiny Dragon. Of course, we all wish that were happening in our sheds and butteries, but we cannot all be so lucky. Can't wait to find out. And I'm going to put that link to the form that you can fill out so you can join Stephanie's newsletter and many others and get all the goodies that you are going to hear about from our authors. But for now, let me introduce our second reader. Our second reader today is Kelley M. Frank. Kelley M. Frank is a horror artist, author, and reviewer. She has appeared in a number of horror anthologies, including Slice Girls. She's also completed interior art and or lettering for books Zealot by C. Von Zell Lewis. She's also an asexual witch. Horror Writers Association affiliate, and an outspoken advocate for the strange and unusual. Kelley, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're having a good Friday. If you like what I've got, you can check me out at morbidsmile.com. And I'm going to read from my anthology that hasn't quite come out with. This is from the flagship story, The Mortician's Secret. Although his name sometimes put off the average passerby, Kyle Zernt was still the best mortician in town. He was always discreet and, without fail, managed to care for his clients in a sympathetic and financially viable way. He was quiet, polite, and, most importantly, local. This made a big difference in a small town where everyone knew his daddy and granddaddy, and sometimes still talked about them as though they still worked his job. Granddad had been dead for years, and his own father had retired from the business, but the name Zernt made locals think of the Zernt and Son mortuary. It was as ingrained as the Saving Grace Baptist Church or the annual Christmas parade, and for good reason. When the chamber's son had been eviscerated by a malfunctioning chainsaw, for example, Kyle had made an open casket funeral possible. Those in attendance had remarked that the boy looked as though he could have stood up and started laughing at any moment, which was exactly the point. Makeup and skill were magical in the right hands, and Kyle was a product of generation-spanning expertise. His father had been an odd man in his own right. A collector of exotic and sometimes rare trinkets in his spare time, the sort that didn't get moved to display shelves in reputable museums. Morbid things, but those are the kind of interests one hones in a job like this. Dad owned a small collection of shrunken heads, various wet specimens, animals and organs suspended in alcohol and sealed jars, but also, most importantly, folders full of notes and drawings he'd made while drinking his way across the world after Mom died. There was no telling where the original ideas had come from, no dates or place names. Most were trash, smeared with alcohol and time, but Kyle couldn't resist reading a few lines first. They were in his father's chunky, fifth-grade level penmanship. The level of vocabulary made it clear that it hadn't been a novel. Dad wasn't nearly as creative as he'd like to believe before the Alzheimer's began eating his brain. Copied, most likely, and from some text his father hadn't been allowed to purchase. There was no indication of where it came from or even of the original title. The collection of wide-ruled pages might have been mistaken for any other rubbish. What he read there at first seemed like one of Dad's weird jokes, but he'd taken the notes home anyway. There really hadn't been much of substance to keep from his father's place, and seeing Dad's handwriting as it had been before the degeneration made him sad. Normally, he'd have spent his evening preparing dinner, playing with his cat, and watching an old movie before bed. Instead, he grabbed a frozen meal, ignored the cat, and didn't sleep until hours later than he should have. He pieced the pages in their proper order and read the whole manuscript in one evening. What he read disgusted him. The crude drawings of supposed magic circles, the instructions to do mad things like create an article of clothing from the deceased, talking to the dead, cannibalism? When he finished it, his heart was racing. He put the pages on his nightstand and went to bed. His dreams were strange, but of course they were after reading something like that. Still, he woke feeling better than he had in days, and, in his opinion, far more clear-sighted. He spent the morning working through the remaining legal proceedings for his father's transfer to hospice care before his first appointment arrived. He didn't have any caskets in stock that appealed to the grieving father, so Kyle walked Sunny Green through the process with the more reputable dealers online. The less trouble a grieving father went to for his 18-year-old son, killed in a car crash by an alcoholic like so many others his age, the better it was for all involved. The poor young boy, Al Green, had been in the running for the Draves draft pick. He'd worked hard for the glory and was rumored to be one of the best and most gregarious players for the team since John Smoltz. And then, while leaving a downtown play with a group of his GSU friends, a drunk driver had forgotten to stop for the pedestrians. It had happened within moments, and in front of the rest of the theater crowd. The police got a slew of 911 calls all at once, but none of it mattered. Promising young Al Green had been struck head on. His upper torso was through the windshield, his legs twitching for an agonizingly long time to those on the scene. The driver had instantly sobered up, adding to the group calling 911. Despite the prompt ambulance response and the fact that Crawford Long Hospital was just across the street, Al Green had been dead by the time help had arrived. Some things couldn't be fixed, no matter how long the doctors worked or how much time family and friends spent praying for their loved one's survival. The boy's father was doing well, given everything, navigating the website, until an ad popped up for lawn care. It featured a smiling preteen boy with a baseball bat slung over his shoulder and a glove in one hand, his ball cap at a jaunty angle. Kyle suggested some coffee, and Mr. Green quickly agreed, fingering a pack of cigarettes. There was no smoking indoors, of course, so Kyle poured 2 mugs of the brew he kept ready for these moments and stood on the front porch as Mr. Green smoked. They didn't say anything, but there really wasn't much to talk about. When they went back inside, it was as though nothing had happened. Later, before he left, Mr. Green took Kyle's hand. He didn't have to say anything, so neither of them did. Kyle knew what Sonny Green would have done with the notes his father had taken. So just stopping here, I really am happy that if you guys like this, this will be up for pre-order pretty soon, and this short story collection will be out in October. And again, you can find me at morbidsmile.com. I've got a newsletter and all kinds of stuff. So thank you.
Kelley, thank you so much for the reading. That was really beautiful and also disturbing and kind of moving, and I can hardly wait to find out where the story goes next. I'm sure you'll look forward to seeing the comments that people have been making in the in that chat thread. Thanks. Okay. Our third reader today is Amelia Gorman. Amelia Gorman lives in Eureka, where she explores the world with her dogs and foster dogs. Find her fiction in Night Script and Cellar Door. Find her poetry in Vastarian, Penumbric, and Strange Horizons. Her chapbook is available from Interstellar Flight Press. Amelia, over to you.
Okay, I'm going to be reading from a story called Giant Killer. It is a conversation between Paul Bunyan and Jack the Giant Killer of fairy tale fame. I think I'll have just enough time to get through each of their opening statements. Call me Paul, the ever-growing. Paul, the unslowing glacier of a man who has been known to scrape his forehead on the stars. Paul, who must but whisper and it rustles the dusty fields of Mars, Neptune, Pluto, and beyond. Have you ever licked the aurora and had it frozen for a second on your tongue? I have. I grew up on the plains of Minnesota, and up and up and up some more, until the plains of Minnesota receded like a distant shore. Birches turned to twigs while my bones competed with each other. The clouds slowly smothered the ground. Still I got taller and taller every day, pissing new rivers into being. This could all be hyperbole. Maybe I was 7, maybe 10 feet tall, but all growth is a kind of horror, as your self expands inside you. It's hard enough to watch where a dozen of your past selves died, marked and notched on a wooden door. That's the kind of growth a family can handle. But no door was built to hold a man like me as I burst older out of the child I once was. Imagine the thickest boil you can, swelling with the richest gout. Imagine bones creaking and shouting, skin shrieking in protest of growth. I downed a cow every morning and still mowed grass with my jaws, demanding every slim calorie within my reach. I grew up in Minnesota until Minnesota grew too small for me. What followed was a heavy tread to the west, hollowing new lakes in my footprints where you might ice fish next winter and think of me. I rode a monstrous sawhorse across the Great Plains to where a bigger horizon lay, and I grew taller every day, and taller and taller. I dragged nothing but a bindle and my axe in my wake, plowing furrows and digging canyons. To see the ocean cresting over the ridge was to behold a home. I followed my ears to the roar of the surf, to see that big blue drink that can never run out, and it still had more to give. I walked high on the dry Sierras, soaking up the nearness of the sun, the coolness of the clouds. I brushed my hands against the fringed tops of sequoias and let them tickle my palms. Yes, to come to the ocean was to come home. I bathed my tired muscles in Thor's sinkhole, where leviathans frolic under the swollen waves. You've never seen huge until you've watched the slick things that only live where there is no air to weigh them down. I befriended a young calf of a blue whale, named her Kind, and we chased eels and stranger things. But I still grew lonely, because all I do is grow, and what is a home without a family? I wasn't complete until I stumbled on the loggers hauling their skid camp through fields of lumber. They weren't horrified, they were delighted of me. They found me a canvas tent as big as a field, and I built bridges over rivers to the sea. We boiled cauldrons of soup and roasted whole elk on spits. This was it. This was all I needed. My name is Jack the Giant Killer, from a long line of giant killers. They stood tall on each other's shoulders to topple even the tallest tyrants. They hacked at wide ankles with axes, shouting timber all the while. They staked down feet and knifed tendons while tenderly raising a generation to take on the job after. That's me. A family tree painted on the parlor wall ties us back to the killers of Gog Magog and Blunderbore. We seeded ourselves all over the world, both old and new, and grew like angry thistles, wild and willful for blood. Like my mother, who killed giants so fast she ran into herself as she was coming home to bed. Margaret the Giant Killer, though I called her Ma, was the hero who poisoned the bay, bringing death to Bress and Brammert. She harvested hemlock for weeks before she had enough to fill the basin. Fish wouldn't swim there for years. Children swim there now, and in the meantime, my mother killed and killed and killed. She killed Corb and Branch. She killed the hurdy-gurdy family that flattened villages. Children live there now. Ma raised me in a creaky little house, or more to the point, I raised myself, as she was so often gone a-killing that even her bedbugs starved. I'm short in stature, but I'll be short with you. I've got no time unless it's for killing. That's what her pocket watch says, the one she gave me before she set out on her last adventure. You know the heap where the poppies make a trail in the meadow? That's my pit trap. And the rotten bodies of Dinos and Dipros are what make the flowers bloom. I'm thinking of growing beans there. I'm going to live up to Ma's reputation if it kills me. And you know it will, because it always does, us giant killers. I've heard of you, Paul. I saw my future laid out black and white in the newspaper, in the West Coast Signal, in the Humboldt Times. Tall order as lumbercab titan rushes to meet demands. But all giants are horrors, even if they don't know it yet. When famine comes, and famine is a-coming, I'm going to kill you, Paul. So here am I, Jack of the Woods, Jack of the wet wood, the waterlogged stump, the damp dew, Jack of the working world. I hide in the branches where a woodpecker pecks like a pile driver. The sun's in my eyes, seizing me in its hot grip. I pull back on my crossbow, the one from my uncle's mother. Huge limbs are in my sight, like a tiger among the trunks. Your stripes are your skin, presented before me on a platter of hunt. And crashing through the canopy goes you, Paul, goes you. You bull. These are living things, precious as china in a tea palace in France. While I scamper up my tree like a nimble squirrel, you lumber without a care. You leave waste in your squashing tracks. Here a beaver dam, there a beehive. When I was a baby boy, I put a nail in a tree. The tree didn't do so well. It stopped growing, grayed, and died. Copper is a killer, so I shoot you full of spikes, Paul. You monster, you're gross for the nimble thing you are, but you're still nailed by my copper shot. Girdled and gaping, you'll be thirsty and hungry forevermore. I'm going to stop there for now and point out that for a giveaway, I'm giving away a copy of my poetry book, Field Guide to Invasive Species of Minnesota, as a print book to anywhere in the US or a PDF to anywhere internationally. So, thank you, everyone.
The title of your poetry book is fantastic.
Yep, and it's got pictures too. Every poem has a nice little picture.
Even better. Speaking of pictures, we loved all of the mind pictures that your words were conjuring for us. That was a great reading. Thank you so much. Our fourth reader today is Helyna L. Clove.
Hi, everyone.
Helyna L. Clove is a sci-fi fantasy novelist, a lover of all types of storytelling, hot comfort drinks, and a universe full of stars. She was born in Hungary and now works as an astrophysicist in the UK. Her debut was in 2022, and she's releasing her new fantasy this year. Helyna.
Hi, everyone. The excerpt I'm going to read is around 1/3 into the book. Our smuggler captain main character, Jean, and her partner, Klix, accidentally take on board 2 refugees, Sophia and Damien, a queen, and her bodyguard. They're being pursued. They're traveling through all these wormhole tunnels and going to a supposedly safe planet to figure out the next steps. And this is the first time that they can really converse, and it does not go that well. They took the long way to Duplex. Leaving the binary system, Jean crossed the lane only to come right back and choose another one. A few systems later, they did the same thing, then coasted about inside a dust cloud with a peculiarly strong magnetic field to cover up their engine signatures. As they turned towards their destination, they avoided the larger hubs and, of course, kept the manipulator turned off the whole time. Duplex wasn't an openly lane hunter-friendly world, but it didn't belong to the Union either. Agents left it alone because controlling it was more hassle than worth. There was nothing to conquer there, except building lands and dirty towns. And the window. "What is this?" a voice spoke behind Jean as she verified the computer's calculations and set the Skylark onto a descending trajectory around the planet. Glancing back, she saw Sophia standing in the door, looking at the view on the front screen, wide-eyed. "This is Duplex," Klix answered, before Jean could yell at the woman for leaving the living area when she'd specifically told her not to wander around on the ship. The Miozan stepped closer to stand between her and Klix, keeping her eyes on the strange world in front of them. But what happened to it? Nothing. Or rather, the same thing that happened to everything else. It's like it was mirrored. Klix nodded. All thanks to the crack. Those are 2 different worlds in 2 different regions in space. Duplex looked like a planet that grew a weird lump, which was also a planet. The one on the far side appeared only in part, a portion of its green-gray disk cut off by the image of space, its surface peeking through a moon-sized triangular hole at the plane of intersection. A nebulous blue glow blanketed the side of that second world, which disappeared when the eye focused on it. "Conjoined twin planets," Sophia murmured. The curious glow in her eyes made her face look alert and alive for the first time since Jean had met her. As they descended into the atmosphere, the surface of Duplex 1 spread out under them, with black blotches of towns spattered in between sallow fields, the populated areas growing in size closer to the window. And when the eye wandered toward the other side, the scene tilted in a dizzying way. The horizon curved more and was weirdly inclined, the ground dark, the vegetation lusher. "If we approached the window from the other direction, you wouldn't see anything. A planet like any other," Jean said. Watching Sophia's fascinated expression, her anger evaporated. That did annoy her too, but memories of her first visit on Duplex beckoned at the edges of her attention. It wasn't only Klix who loved this place. "From here, though, you can travel to the other side." "How can something like this exist?" Sophia marveled. "How can a lane exist?" Klix answered. Sophia stared at him with interest, so he went on. "The window co-moves with these planets, both here and there, like the lanes with the solar systems they're born in. The intersection is more or less stable, but things turn bottom up quite frequently around these parts." "Does this happen a lot, windows like this?" "Not exactly. Cracks, sure. They pop up on stars more often than planets. And those things will blow up on you real fast. The material can stabilize, and when the star's gone, you'll get a big old crack in the middle of empty space again." Jim peered at the girl. "You honestly haven't seen stuff like this before." Sophia shook her head. "I saw films, but it's not the same. I didn't travel much because of the war." "War, huh?" Jean grunted. "There's nothing else you people can spend your precious time on." "Like grave robbing and pillaging?" The 3 of them turned around at the same time. Damien stood in the entrance, leaning against the frame with one hand. His face was a healthier color, but he was bent over, exhaustion radiating from his body. The bandages Klix had applied to his arm and broad chest had started to come off in loops. "You are not supposed to get up yet," Sophia exclaimed. Damien glanced at her, but his eyes went back to Jean and Klix. Jean stood, staring him up and down. "Ah, so you're one of those guys." "I call what we do salvaging," Klix said with a pedantic expression. He rose from his seat as well and sized the man's bandages up, reproachful. And Sophia is right, you shouldn't be walking around yet. Damien's drained face twitched, looking at the Talalan. He moved towards Sophia as if wanting to shield her. And who are you supposed to be? He's Crix, my partner. Jean took a step forward, placing her hands on her hips while brushing the gun holstered on her belt. Damien was barely conscious during their escape, and there hadn't been much time for introductions on Mioza, but his hostility was alarming. He must have put two and two together about what kind of ship he boarded and was clearly not satisfied. He's also the one who hit you up, so I recommend a friendlier tone. It's true. Sophia placed a placating hand on her friend's arm. They saved us both. Damien turned to her. Did the others make it? Where's Nasir? Sophia hesitated, and her companion clenched his jaw. Your friend stayed behind, Crix said. He's the reason we're alive. No one spoke for a few seconds. Sophia's fingers gripped Damien's arm in an imploring way. His square jaw tensed, his face stony as he seemed to swallow with difficulty. Where's my gun? He asked in between breaths. Jean thought of the sympathy stirring up in her at the man's subdued grief and shrugged. I stashed it. When we're done here, you can have it back, and the less trouble you make, the sooner that will happen. I'm not ecstatic that you're stuck on my ship either. I usually don't do human cargo. Or ever, Crix cut in. You never do human cargo. And this was definitely not what I expected. What did you expect? Damien asked. His tone was calmer now, but Jean felt his piercing gaze stabbing through her skin, taking apart her every word and move. Not important, she snapped. We'll do a short detour. You stay in your backsides on the ship, and I'll solve the problem. They're going to talk to Nasir's contact, Sophia added. She was clearly taken aback by her companion's heated reaction. We're going with you, Damien told Jean. No, you're not. Then you'll have to shoot me. Jean inhaled slowly. Her glance wandered to the front screen, getting lost in the view of the fields and forests of Duplex. And who the hell is going to pay me for all this? No one, kid. No one. She exhaled. I don't give a damn. Just don't get in my way or I might take you up on that. She sat back, turning her attention to the screens, and a few moments later the door clicked shut as both Miozans exited. Exhibit A of why I don't do human cargo, Jean groaned. Too much fucking trouble. Well, thank you for listening. You can get this book and also a companion novella on sale right now, and I have a giveaway also during this event. And visit my site if you're interested. Everything or anything.
Thank you very much, Helyna. That was certainly intriguing and tense. I think everybody's a little curious to know what's going to happen next and where this crew will wind up, what sort of adventures they're going to face. Great reading. Okay. Our fifth reader today is Michelle Renee Lane. And there she is. Michelle Renee Lane writes dark speculative fiction about identity politics and women of color battling their inner demons while fighting/falling in love with monsters. Her short fiction has appeared in several anthologies, and her Bram Stoker Award-nominated debut novel, Invisible Chains, 2019, is available from Haverhill House Publishing. Michelle, take it away.
Hi, folks. Today, I'm going to be reading a scene from chapter 13 of the novel in which my protagonist is about to be punished for something that is completely out of her control. Okay. I looked up into the nymph's face. Drops of water splashed my cheeks and mixed with tears. I wished my body were solid like the statue the first time the whip struck my back and split it open. After the fifth lash, I lost count. Each time he struck me, a new gash opened on my back. The pain was so bad, I couldn't catch my breath, which made it harder to scream. My dress was in shreds, and so was the skin on my back. Blood and sweat mixed into a salty, sticky mess that ran down my sides, stinging my open wounds, and dripped into the fountain. Salt, musk, blood, and leather combined into a perfume which on their own would normally have pleased me. Now, they would only remind me of pain and fear. I cried and begged, but no one heeded my pleas. Then, all of a sudden, the beating stopped. My back tensed as I waited for the next blow, but it didn't come. "What are you waiting for? Strike her again, James," Lottie shouted. "Hush, Charlotte. I heard something in the alley behind the house." Near the rear wall of the courtyard, there was a low growl. I opened my eyes and looked down into the fountain. The water had turned pink. The growl came again, but I couldn't see what was making it. "Jimmy, go see what that is, but come right back. We're not done here," Lynch said. All the strength had left my body. I couldn't fight now if I had to. More than anything, I just wanted to lie down and die right there in the garden. I was about to fade from exhaustion when something jumped over the wall and attacked Lynch. Lottie screamed. With the little strength I had left, I turned to see what could only be a wolf tearing its way through Lynch's throat and chest. It was the biggest animal I had ever seen, at least as tall as a man, taller, and covered in coarse black fur. It picked Lynch up and shook him from side to side in its jaws, and then dropped him to the ground. Then it came at me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Lottie crawling across the yard to kneel beside her husband's corpse. I was so tired and scared, I couldn't even scream when the animal fell forward onto its front paws and started walking towards me on all fours. Big John came around the corner of the house with an axe. He raised it over his head and ran at the animal, but he wasn't fast enough. The wolf turned and snapped his teeth at Big John. He jumped back just in time and didn't get bitten, but the wolf bore down on him and chased him toward the house. Lottie rose on unsteady feet. Blood covered her hands and the front of her dress. She quietly backed away from Lynch's body and followed Big John into the house. No one was coming to save me. The wolf turned back to me and approached the fountain, stopping short just a few feet away, watching me. It didn't come any closer. I thought for sure it would kill me. Instead, the creature bowed its head, then looked me in the eyes. I swear that animal was smiling at me. Then it turned and leapt back over the wall. I don't know how long I was out, but when I came to, Senor Velazquez was untying my hands. A wide-brimmed black hat and his little round dark spectacles kept the sun off his face, and leather gloves covered his hands. He lifted me into his arms and carried me to my room. He placed me face down on the bed and examined my wounds. "Jacqueline, can you hear me?" "Yes," I whispered. My throat hurt from screaming. "You lost a lot of blood. Your skin is badly torn. Will you allow me to help you?" His words were clipped and tense. "Yes, Senor Velazquez." "Call me Carlos." "Carlos?" "Yes." "Am I going to die?" "Not if I can help it." "Did you see the wolf?" "I did. We can talk about it after you rest." I turned my head to look at him kneeling next to the bed. I had never seen a white man so worried before. A frown twisted his beautiful mouth, and his eyes were glassy like he'd been crying. Had he watched Lynch whipping me? Carlos removed his hat, gloves, and spectacles and set them on the table next to my bed. His cold fingers soothed away some of the pain as he examined my back. He peeled shredded scraps of my dress from inside the wounds. I gripped the blanket and bit my lip. My back was raw, sore, and sticky. "Your wounds are much worse than I thought," Carlos said. He held my hand, and I saw there was fear in his eyes. "I'm not dead yet." My vision blurred. I had to close one eye to focus. He stroked my cheek and brushed away strands of hair that had become stuck to my face with sweat. The coolness of his hand comforted me. I wanted to drift off to sleep, or even death, but the pain wouldn't let me. Jacqueline, I'm going to heal you. Without my help, you will die. You lost a lot of blood when James beat you. Unless you want to become like me, I must heal you before you lose more blood. How? He stood and took off his long black coat, rolled up his white shirt sleeve, and pulled a pocket knife from his vest. He pierced the flesh in the crook of his arm, lifted my head, and placed his arm against my mouth. Drink, he said. And I'm going to stop there.
As well you should. What a fantastic and fascinating scene. Thank you so much for reading. Okay, our final reader today is Devan Barlow. Devan Barlow is the author of the Curses and Curtains series of fairy tales, musicals, fantasy novels. Her short fiction and poetry have appeared in several anthologies and magazines. She reads voraciously and can often be found hanging out with her dog, drinking tea, and thinking about sea monsters. I'm right there with you, Devan, and I can't wait to hear what you have to read.
Hi, so this is from An Uncommon Curse, which is book 1 in the Curses and Curtains series, which are full of fairy tales and also musical theater. And this is Act 1, Chapter 1. When I got engaged to Demetrius, I didn't know he was an enchanted prince who turned into a bird every night. It's not the sort of question you think to ask. However, the chattering crowd lining the entrance to the Lorzione Resplendent seemed to think differently as they peered at the three of us entering. Me, Demetrius, and Cressida, his soon-to-be wife. The sound of conversation lessened slightly as we stepped into the theater, fading to a dull roar as the lift to the royal box cut us off from the crowd. The box was shielded from the hall's noise by a curtain, which Demetrius held open for Cressida and me. Yet, the moment we stepped into the box, there was a rush of air as what seemed like every person in the theater turned toward us. I would have thought they'd be sick of staring at the three of us by now. We'd been in Lorzione for 10 days already. I didn't know what to do with my face. Should I smile? I should probably smile. I couldn't make my face move. Cressida bent close enough to me I could smell the drifting citrus of her perfume, her brown eyes kind. Why don't we sit? I want to read my program before it starts. I was grateful for the excuse to ignore the audience, until I noticed Demetrius staring at the box's seats with dismay. I stifled a sigh. We should go, he said. We can come back once the overture starts and the lights go down so they won't see us, and have everyone speculate on what the three of us were arguing about in the lift for so long we were late for Act 1, I asked. Demetrius frowned, his eyes flicking toward the theatergoers, hanging on every moment, and straightened both of his cuffs unnecessarily. I'm sorry, Susan. I thought people might have gotten over... Demetrius, I interrupted. Maybe we should just watch the show? I hoped the rest of the audience had the same idea. Or would they stare at us the whole time? The box contained 4 seats, arranged on a slight diagonal to ensure they all had a good view of the stage. It became painfully clear none of us had any idea where to sit. If Cressida chose one of the end seats, she'd be implying Demetrius should sit beside her with me on his other side. But if she chose one of the center seats, Demetrius and I would be on either side of her. Both options would fuel the fascinated crowd's gossip. Was Cressida avoiding me, her soon-to-be husband's unfortunate former fiancé? Or Was she placing herself between us? A bulwark against whatever lingering feelings I clutched tight to my heart despite the dissolution of my ties to him. I was so sick of all of this. I plunked myself down in one of the outermost seats and forced myself to stare at the curtain-shrouded stage. Let the other two figure it out. And I'm going to stop there, and if you want to read about what happens when this magical musical starts, you'll need to read the book.
That was a fantastic setup for all sorts of intrigue, politics, and social activities to come. So definitely check out An Uncommon Curse and find Devan's website. There is a link in the chat box, so you can check that out right away. So thank you so much to everyone who was able to come out and join us today.